we're cranking out all kinds of tanks and aircraft and ships and aircraft carriers during World War II.
Hey, I got an idea. Maybe the U.S. should invade the U.S. and bomb the shit out of it and then rebuild it, like they do in all the other countries.
Like Iraq?
Yeah.
All right.
Are we rebuilding Iraq? Is that what you're saying?
well,
we're owning whatever's rebuilt.
Yeah,
so.
That's where the money is.
But it is incredible that this much money has been shoveled into Wall Street, and it's not as if the taxpayer is getting any seats on the boards of directors, is being able to control, the way the banks operate, is even able to look at the balance sheets and see how bad the situation is at any of these banks. I mean, that's something else. Telling an investor to pump in their investment, but they don't even get to look at the books.
This is John again, Tim. You're exactly right. Somewhere between $2 and $3 trillion is now either on the books or in off-the-books liabilities at either the U.S. Treasury or the Federal Reserve. We have 13 new credit facilities, everything from the refinancing of the term auction facility to foreign currency swap facilities to, as you rightly point out, the commercial paper facility, to the Fed's discount window, which was only open to member banks, to charter banks, now open to the broker-dealer community.
Oh yeah, you could drive a bus through that discount window.
Absolutely, just a flood of money going out of the Treasury and out of the Fed into the private sector, and nothing is happening.
But it's really incredible. I mean, when you think that the agenda is still one of not re-regulating, we spoke about this morning. It's not as if there are margin and capital requirements for derivative instruments, for hedge funds. There's a whole shadow banking sector out there, and while it's being propped up at taxpayer expense, it's not conceding an inch in its prerogatives.
Perfect. Okay, let's go right into it. I wasn't finished with the auto sector because I wanted to ask you about Mark Zandi's estimate. He was the guy from the Moody's Investor Service who said that this bailout, in testimony before Chris Dodd's committee yesterday, said that the bailout could cost as much as $125 billion. I wanted to ask you about that.
Well, this is from Standard & Poor's.
From Moody's.
From Moody's, yeah. Well, they've been wrong on other things, of course. Maybe that's a cheap a cheap shot at the credit ratings agencies. But look, it's a fair question. What's the total cost in bridge loans and/or bailouts going to be? I do think he should also ask what's the total cost of doing nothing. It might be that Honda and Toyota and other companies are able to come in, step into the void, acquire the failed assets of a General Motors and build up new plant and equipment. But again, I would say that these are not normal times. It's not as if this is a collapse of a company in 1999. This is more akin to the 1930s, where prices are actually falling. People are losing jobs very quickly, 500,000 in the last month. In the last month, from what the Economic Policy Institute reports, more than 250,000 foreclosure filings. The bottom is dropping out of this economy right now, and just the transition of letting a big industry fail and waiting for the bankruptcy process and foreign investors to come in, or any investors to come in to get those resources working again, just the lag time will be very costly. And again, that's going to create an ever-rising passive deficit for state and local governments and the federal government, paying the cost of failures of communities that are falling apart, of higher unemployment, compensation for extended periods of time, bringing in less in tax revenues. It just doesn't seem to me the time to throw money at the problem, but it doesn't seem to be the time to run away from it. This country should have a world-class automobile industry. It should have a world-class aerospace industry, you name it. Manufacturing should be something that we're proud of and that we do well. And this generation has acted as if we don't need to make anything anymore. We don't need to even manufacture our own infrastructure or maintain it and repair it properly.
Well, when you think about what the number one export of the United States has been in the last 10 years, let's go back to the work of Patrick Bond, who said it right here on this show. The number one export has been subprime debt.
Yeah.
I mean, what the hell?
Right. Packages, right?
Yeah, securitized debt, call it CMOs, collateralized mortgage obligations, debt obligations, structured investment vehicles. and then the hundreds of trillions of dollars in swaps and derivatives, which is the really toxic stuff, written on top of those positions. That's what we've exported to the world.
Well, that's absolutely right. And, that is an enormous bubble that's now deflating. And the underside of that bubble, all those years when we were, a financial innovator and exporting debt, our own manufacturing base was being eroded. And not just our manufacturing base, the infrastructure, the school system, the healthcare system. We've become a weaker country internally during that period of time.
My own father has stepped forward, and incidentally, he's a dyed-in-the-wall, conservative Republican, Polish Catholic. He even wrote Sarah Palin a love letter. He and I share the same name, and he's so pissed at me having this show and my newspaper column with the Alternative Weekly's Press, and we share the same name, and he wanted to let them know there was another John Sakowicz out there. So he wrote a letter to Sarah Palin, that actually hit the national network news. I think it actually...
As John Sakowicz, which is great.
As John Sakowicz. Right. But he stepped forward and he said, and we agreed on one thing, and that was that in the last 10 years, the United States, there was almost like a cultural shift, some kind of a paradigm shift. We stopped making things of value to export to the world. And what was our number one industry? Wall Street, investment banking. And what is investment banking? What has it been these last 10 years? It has simply been, and I'll use a metaphor. It's been like cutting a cake, putting it on a plate, and every time that plate gets passed around to a circle of 10 people, one of those people took off a crumb from the plate. You don't create value doing that by scraping crumbs off of a plate of cake, and then by the time it gets to the final plate holder, it's a smaller slice of cake. There's no value in that service.
Your father is right onto it, and if we stop making things of value, perhaps it's because we stopped realizing what it was we should value. Your father's generation, I imagine, was the GI generation. And, we are always hearing right now that the federal government is spending way too much money, a focus on public debt as opposed to the private debt levels. And when you look back at your father's generation, I imagine, the generation that fought in World War II and came back and fought a Cold War, the spending during the 1941 to 51 decade, federal spending was twice as high as it is today. But what did they do during that decade? They won a war in 3.5 years. They took 16 million returning GIs and gave them, a very large percentage of them, anyone who wanted it, a free college education, free tuition, living stipends, 4 years at any university anywhere in the world. I mean, it was the beginning of the technological boom in this country.
Right.
And during that decade, they financed the rebuilding of Western Europe and Japan. It's a generation that didn't sit on its rear end and do nothing. It left the world better off for us. And this generation is just really, what have we valued? I guess you take a look at where the big pay has gone. It's gone to these Wall Street financial wizards who have figured out a way to privatize the gains and socialize the losses, right?
Right. Well, how much do you think?
I love that expression.
Yeah.
Privatize the profits, socialize the losses.
Yep, that's exactly what they've done.
I love that. That should be a bumper sticker, Tim.
And so my thinking on this is that I'm looking back at the tech bubble, and I was involved in that. I worked for George Lucas's Industrial Light and Magic right in the middle of that tech bubble boom. And it seems to me that tech bubble actually caused some of this kind of irrational exuberance in a lot of other markets, including the housing market. So when you're making money hand over fist, as a Google stock goes IPO or whatever it may be, you have all these kind of ripple effects of that much money that, granted, it's not real money, but it got filtered out of the economy, and people started feeding, kind of a feeding frenzy on all that hype and all that money. And so housing prices started going up, and they kind of rippled out through all these places, and everybody could play in that tech stock market, and that was a huge bubble. Mm-hmm. And then when that burst in 2000, it was kind of like, what are we going to do? This could have happened in 2000.
Well,